stumbling through the door, drunk from a night of heavy partying. He demanded pounded yam, ignoring the rice Nneka had prepared earlier. When she tried to gently suggest he eat what was ready, his temper flared. In a fit of rage, Obie grabbed a broom from behind the kitchen door and began to beat her. Nneka's terrified screams filled the air as she begged for her life. Aaron, startled awake by his mother's cries, rushed to her side, shouting, "Daddy, stop! Please, you'll kill her!" But his pleas fell on deaf ears. Obie's anger only seemed to grow as he struck her. In a moment of desperation, Aaron pushed his father, sending him tumbling down the stairs. Obie landed with a sickening crack, breaking his arm. Panic spread through the household, and they rushed him to the hospital. Obie was a man with everything a person could dream of. He lived in Lagos, surrounded by wealth, luxury, and fame, known for his flashy and womanizing lifestyle. People admired him, but many wondered why he was still single, given his many relationships. For Obie, however, believed independent women would never respect him the way he wanted, and he was tired of feeling like he was in a constant battle with them. He wanted a woman he could easily control, one who would submit to his every wish. One day, Obie shocked everyone by announcing his engagement to a woman named Nneka, a quiet and simple girl from a small village. Unlike the women Obie usually dated, Nneka wasn't rich or well-known. She didn't wear fancy clothes or have the confidence of city women. To him, Nneka was the perfect choice, a woman he could mold and who would depend on him for everything. Nneka was still young and filled with hope when she first married Obie. But that hope quickly turned to pain and fear. Her husband cared little for her well-being, treating her like she was nothing more than a servant in his house. Even during her pregnancy, Obie's violent outbursts never ceased. He would beat her over the smallest things, ignoring the life growing inside her. One evening, after yet another brutal beating, Nneka lost her first child. That night, she cried alone, broken, wondering if she had the strength to continue in this marriage. The pain was unbearable, yet she clung to a small hope that things might one day change. A few months passed, and Nneka found herself pregnant again. This time, despite her fear and sorrow, she gave birth to her first child, a baby whose innocent gaze brought her some comfort. She thought that maybe, just maybe, having children would change her husband's heart. She prayed that he might finally see her as his wife and cherish her. But it was just a dream. Obie's harsh treatment continued, his words cutting deep as he reminded her repeatedly that her only purpose was to bear children and serve him in the kitchen. He belittled her, telling her she would never be part of his family. Every small mistake Nneka made seemed to provoke him further, and he took pleasure in making her beg for her life, feeling powerful and godlike as she pleaded. Obie controlled every aspect of her life, forbidding her from working or making friends. Her world became limited to his needs, with no one to lean on. Eventually, Nneka gave birth to another son, a boy who grew up watching his mother's silent suffering. By the time this second son, Aaron, turned 15, he was strong and fiercely protective of his mother. Whenever his father tried to raise a hand against her, Aaron would step in, desperate to defend her. One night, they waited up for Obie, who was late from work. The hours slipped by until they all fell asleep, unaware of the storm about to come. Obie finally arrived home around midnight, stumbling through the door, drunk from a night of heavy partying. He demanded pounded yam, ignoring the rice Nneka had prepared earlier. When she tried to gently suggest he eat what was ready, his temper flared. In a fit of rage, Obie grabbed a broom from behind the kitchen door and began to beat her. Nneka's terrified screams filled the air as she begged for her life. Aaron, startled awake by his mother's cries, rushed to her side, shouting, "Daddy, stop! Please, you'll kill her!" But his pleas fell on deaf ears. Obie's anger only seemed to grow as he struck her. In a moment of desperation, Aaron pushed his father, sending him tumbling down the stairs. Obie landed with a sickening crack, breaking his arm. Panic spread through the household, and they rushed him to the hospital. As they waited for news of his condition, Nneka held her son close, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't have done that, Aaron," she whispered, her heart torn between gratitude and fear. "I'm used to it." But Aaron was resolute. "I can't stand by and let him kill you, Mama. If anyone deserves to die, it's him for what he's done to you." When Obie recovered from his injury, his fury was boundless. He disowned Aaron, calling him ungrateful and accusing him of trying to kill him, his own father, because of his witch of a mother. From that day on, he refused to support Aaron, cutting him off entirely and focusing only on training the first son, Nnamdi. Emeka, though quiet and reserved, watched everything in silence, carrying a deep, hidden hope that someday this nightmare would end. Years passed, and Emeka grew older, turning 20. As he matured, he could no longer ignore the suffering his mother endured. One day, he confronted his father, asking why he treated Nneka so harshly. Obie, unbothered, shared his twisted beliefs on controlling women. Women are inferior to men and needed to be controlled, or else they would bring shame and ruin upon the family. "Don't mind your younger brother. He doesn't know what I am doing now, until he grows and gets married. Listen to me, my son," Obie said. "A strong man needs to keep his wife in line, and showing any softness would lead to your wife disrespecting you." To Obie, love and compassion were signs of weakness, and he had no interest in them. Instead, he took pride in his authority, expecting his sons to follow in his footsteps and treat women with the same cold dominance. But Nneka held very different beliefs and secretly advised her sons whenever she could. She urged them to be kind and respectful, to treat others with compassion and dignity. Nneka reminded them that real strength lies in understanding and empathy, not in intimidation or cruelty. She explained that love should be the foundation of every relationship and that controlling another person would only lead to unhappiness. "Your worth isn't in how much power you hold over others," she would say, "but in how well you lift others up." Obie, discovering that Nneka was giving advice to their sons, Aaron and Emeka, teaching them to be strong and independent. This made him furious. He accused Nneka of trying to turn the boys against him, saying, "You are spoiling me for my children, using them to fight against me." His anger grew uncontrollable. Each time he thought about her words to the boys, he would beat her harder, leaving bruises and injuries on her. Despite the abuse, Nneka chose to remain silent about her suffering. She didn't want her sons to be part of the conflict. Whenever Aaron and Emeka noticed her injuries and questioned her, she simply told them to respect their father and not get involved. "This is my fight," she said firmly, reassuring them, "and I will survive." When Aaron and Emeka left for university, Nneka's situation worsened. With the boys no longer around, Obie felt he had complete control over her. He began to bring other women into their home, often without any shame. These women would mock Nneka, ridiculing her in her own house. Some even insulted her to her face, calling her weak and useless. The humiliation cut deep, but Nneka remained quiet, holding on to whatever strength she could find within herself. One evening, Nneka's cries reached the ears of her neighbor, Ijeoma. Concerned, Ijeoma knocked on Nneka's door the next day, gently asking if she was all right. At first, Nneka was hesitant, but she eventually shared her struggles with Ijeoma. Seeing Nneka's pain, Ijeoma became a source of comfort and support. She would listen to Nneka and encourage her, offering a shoulder to lean on when she felt alone. Ijeoma began to plant seeds of hope in Nneka's heart, reminding her of her value as a person. She would tell Nneka, "You deserve to be treated with respect. Don't let anyone make you feel less." These words slowly began to spark something inside Nneka, a faint glimmer of self-worth and the possibility of a life beyond the suffering she endured. With Ijeoma's encouragement, Nneka took her first steps toward self-improvement. Ijoma taught her basic reading and writing skills, and Nneka eagerly absorbed this knowledge, feeling a newfound pride in herself. For the first time in a long time, she felt capable and empowered. This small step made her believe that maybe, just maybe, she could build a better future. Obie was quick to notice the changes in Nneka. It started subtly. First, he saw her standing a bit taller, her eyes not as downcast as they used to be. She began choosing her clothes more carefully, dressing in colors that suited her, as if trying to reclaim her sense of self. She would braid her hair differently, sometimes adding small decorative beads, giving her a new glow. Obie had never seen in her before. This unsettled him. One morning, as Obie sat at the breakfast table, he watched Nneka enter the room with a new kind of confidence. She was wearing a simple but bright dress, her posture straight, and her face was calm and unbothered, even as she served him his food. Her lack of fear angered him deeply. He was used to her shuffling around the house with her head down, always trying to avoid his gaze. But now, she seemed different, more composed, almost as if she was no longer scared of him. "Who are you dressing up for?" he asked sharply, his tone dripping with suspicion. He looked her up and down, his gaze cold and calculating. Nneka met his eyes briefly, the hint of a quiet defiance flickering in her gaze before she looked away. She simply replied, "I am dressing up for myself." Her answer was simple, but it ignited a fire within Obie. How dare she talk to him like that? How dare she imply that she had the right to feel beautiful or confident without his permission? Obie stood up, pushing his chair back violently, and advanced towards her. "You think you're somebody now, don't you?" he sneered, gripping her arm tightly. "Just because you put on a new dress, you think you can look me in the eyes?" Nneka winced, but held her ground, refusing to let him see her pain. She stayed silent, knowing that speaking would only fuel his anger more. Seeing her silence as defiance, Obie's grip tightened. He began yelling, accusing her of trying to embarrass him, to make him look like a fool in his own home. He accused her of acting up just because their sons were away. "You think you can do whatever you want, because Aaron and Nneka are not here to see you?" he spat. "You're just a woman. Remember your place." But even as he hurled these words at her, something in Nneka had shifted. She stood there, absorbing his words, yet in her heart, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of her own dignity. Thanks to Ijoma's support, she was beginning to see herself as more than just Obie's wife, more than someone meant to endure endless suffering. For Obie, this silent resistance, this new strength he sensed in Nneka, was infuriating. It made him feel like he was losing his grip on her, like sand slipping through his fingers. That day, Obie stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him, leaving Nneka standing alone. Obie saw an opportunity to expand his wealth quickly, ignoring all the red flags. Unfortunately for him, it backfired. Almost overnight, he lost nearly everything. His empire crumbled, and the once confident and arrogant man found himself shaken and desperate. Struggling to accept this dramatic turn of events, Obie turned to alcohol. He drank heavily, hoping to numb the pain and forget the mess he was in. Night after night, he drowned his anger and frustration in drink, spiraling deeper into despair. One evening, after a long bout of drinking, he got behind the wheel, too intoxicated to think straight. In his drunken state, he lost control, crashing the car and suffering injuries that left him crippled. The powerful man who once commanded respect now found himself lying in a hospital bed, dependent on others to take care of him. Nneka, meanwhile, had changed. For years, she'd been in Obie's shadow, enduring his cruelty and control. But with him now out of the picture, she began to find her own strength. She became more self-reliant, realizing that she no longer needed to live under his thumb. Eventually, she made the decision to leave him to fend for himself, freeing herself from his grip. For the first time, she could focus on her own happiness. Obie, now desperate, tried to appeal to Nneka's sense of loyalty. He pleaded with her to take care of him, reminding her that he was her husband. But Nneka hadn't forgotten the years of suffering he had put her through. Each plea fell on deaf ears as she recalled all the times he had belittled her and kept her trapped. She was finally in control of her own life, and she wasn't about to give that up. Nneka found a small job that allowed her to earn for herself, giving her a new sense of purpose. She left Obie to deal with his own problems, making it clear that he had to face the consequences of his choices. Meanwhile, Obie's friends, once so eager to be around him when he was successful, started to disappear. No one wanted to be associated with him now that he was down on his luck. Alone and isolated, Obie felt the weight of his mistakes. Watching Nneka become independent only deepened his loneliness. He tried to appeal to her once again, reminding her that he was still her husband. But Nneka stood firm, remembering all the pain he had caused her. She no longer felt any obligation to care for the man who had made her life so difficult. Even their sons, Aaron and Amika, understood her decision. They saw the strength in their mother and respected her choice to leave Obie to his own fate. They chose to stand by her, knowing the hardship she had endured. In the end, Obie was left with nothing but memories of his lost power and a bitter understanding of the cost of his pride and cruelty. He learned too late that his actions had not only destroyed his own life, but had pushed away the people who might have cared for him in his time of need. Nneka, finally free, was able to start a new chapter, leaving the man who had once controlled her to face his downfall alone.